Hi everyone, Jake Smeester here, creative content specialist for Amazon Sumerian. And we are doing our second broadcast for the week, this one on my own channel, to continue some of the work that we did yesterday on the AWS channel, that broadcast. We are continuing the work of building an interactive city. I know I've taken a couple weeks off. My apologies for being a little bit absent on this channel in the last couple weeks. Just trying to get in a rhythm of doing this on my channel and also the AWS channel. So thanks for joining us. And if you are joining me, I'm sitting alone in the studio. Ben is not with me. So here I am. Let me double check that I am streaming, that we are live, that we are good. It looks like we are. All right. Let me get out of the way of there we go. Creating a city using external assets. We are really excited about the models and assets that TurboSquid offers. If you go to turbosquid.com, they have lots of really cool stuff. So models and assets, entities, all sorts of stuff that you can use, purchase. Some of it's free to use to create your own scenes, and they work in Amazon Sumerian. One thing to make sure of, though, is that you are filtering looking for assets that are either FBX or OBJ file formats. And if you find those and plug them into Sumerian, they should work beautifully. So yeah, that's what we're going to be looking at today. TurboSquid, we're going to continue to create a larger scene. And actually, I started over a little bit. So we're going to do a few things. So even though it says using timeline, I'm going to do that first because I got a little rushed yesterday just because I was just trying to cover a lot of things. And some of my timelines just didn't work quite the way I wanted them to. So I already have a pre-built scene with the timelines functioning. So I'm going to show you those timelines that I have. And those are 3 different timelines, a car and a fire truck going back and forth up and down the street, and also a plane taking off, which is part of what we looked at yesterday. And so we're going to look at the completed version and how that works and cover some best practices, which I veered from yesterday, admittedly. So I will do my best in the future to keep up with my suggested best practices. Okay, so that's what we're going to look at first. So this right here, this is actually what we're going to do first, timeline. Then we're going to look at a larger scene. Though the whole time we are, there it is, we are using TurboSquid. Yeah, so let's jump over to my screen. That is not my screen. 1 second. This is my screen. All right. So here we are. We have the scene that has a bunch of entities in it. Let me zoom out. And I made a, not big mistake, a kind of small mistake of increasing the scale of all these to, most of them were about 3 times the size. So let's look at building 2, transform. Yeah, see, so I set the scale values to 3 on a lot of these. Some I did a little bit more, some a little bit less. And this is something that I actually want to build and use in virtual reality using a VR headset so I can walk around in this city or teleport around in the city. It's kind of hard to walk very far in VR. So I made the mistake of thinking that 3 was a good size. It turns out it's not quite a good size. Is that the scale that they bring it in, that the creator of these models, it's actually a really great size for VR as it is. And so we don't actually, moving forward, have to change the scale. But again, so to cover that again, what we're going to be doing is we're going to look at timelines, and then we're going to start again building this city. And I'll show you kind of the end goal. And this is going to be a multi-week project. This is going to be something I'm going to be working on. And in the midst of that, we're later in a few weeks, we're going to start doing some stuff where we actually have guests on and doing some Q&A and things like that. And so this is just going to be an ongoing project to build a large scene. So that's what it is. Can you select everything? Sweet Games, thank you for joining me again. Can you select everything and scale it down to 1? You cannot, actually. You can only, let's see, because if you select the entire scene up here, so this is the scene level entity, top level entity. I gotta be more consistent. I say top level, root level, and scene level entity. I say all 3 of those things. I need to stick with 1. I should probably just say scene level, but also top level works good. No, both are correct. Anyway, so if I select this, notice that there's not a transform value. So I can't actually scale it down. So any child entities within the scene, you have to do those. So of course, I could put all of these entities into one empty entity and scale all that down. But if you build it separated out, then you can only scale it down separated out. So to answer your question, yes and no. It just depends on how you bring it all in. So I did not put it all under one entity, which would have been, yeah, that could have been smart. There's probably actually for something like this, that would make sense for having such a large scene with so many different things. And and that's one thing I want to experiment with this project is what's the best way to nest entities? And when you're making lots of duplicates and moving things around, what's the best practice for that? So those are some things that we are going to be learning as well. Okay, let's look at our timelines. I'm going to select my taxi. I scaled this back down. I'm going to go back to 3 so it fits better within the scene. And I also was experimenting with VR, which we will get to later. All right, so here is my taxi cab. Let's press play and see what happens. And there it goes. All right, so we press play and the taxi cab goes down the street. And then it'll turn around when it gets to the end, as well as the fire trucks. So the fire truck and the taxi cab are essentially doing the same thing, just going up and down the street. As I was experimenting with this, I was going to, and I would like to do this, and we can actually experiment with that today, is if you are turning, I might not get to it today. If you are turning a corner, this is something I noticed, is that when you're turning a corner, it's interesting because the center of the cab is kind of the axis point where it will turn. And so it's the middle of the car, where on a regular car, it's the front axle of the car. So the front wheels are where it's turning. So a car is turning and the back kind of turns from behind it. But when you rotate an entity here, what it's happening is actually it's just rotating the whole thing. And so it doesn't turn, I might have been just blocking the microphone. It doesn't turn, if you just move this around the corner, excuse me, it doesn't move around the corner like a car naturally would. You would have to make some other changes and add some extra keyframes in there to make that happen. Let me zoom out so I can explain that a little bit better. Okay, so if I'm moving my car around, normally what happens is you're trying to make this left turn, okay? But the center of the car is really what's actually moving. And so the whole thing is just kind of moving in a non-natural way. So one thing that you could do is just add a bunch of keyframes to position it to where it actually looks like it's moving on a normal path. Another thing that you could do is actually nest the taxi within another empty entity and move it back. So it's actually, you're moving the empty entity and it is located really in in the front part of the taxi. So it actually will rotate more appropriately, if that makes sense. So timelines they're not tricky in the sense that they're difficult to use. They're tricky in the sense that keyframes are just are hard to work with, because if you're not used to working with keyframes, you don't use them a lot. There's just a lot to keep track of, especially when you have so many different scale translation values. All right, so let's look at these timelines. I'm going to look at the text. Oh, Sweet Games, you have a lot of questions. Question, you had to position everything roads manually. Are there snap tools in Sumerian? There are currently not any snap tools in Sumerian. Cloud Reach Stewart, yes, not currently. Did you fix the taxi transform, Sweet Games? I think you need to change the rotation to energy. Nice, I didn't know that was fixed yesterday. Missed part of the stream. Looking at your questions. Thank you. Keep it up, Sweet Games. If you made an empty entity, could you change the rotation point? Yes, exactly. That's what I was just saying. Yada, yada, yada. Not yada, yada. Those are great questions, but I think we've covered it all. Okay, so let's look at the taxi. And this is actually a different timeline than the one I was working on yesterday. Very similar. So let's look at the timeline. I'm going to move my camera up here so we can get a bird's eye view. Oops. No. Okay, and my VR camera rig is actually kind of covering it up, so I'm going to delete that. Okay. All right, and let's get that timeline back. Did I press play? I think I did. There it goes. Okay. All right, it's a little bit small, but all right, so I'm going to pause it. This is actually, if you paused using timelines, it's actually a really handy way to look at stuff. Oh, shoot. Except if you bring it back to 0, then it gets goofed up. All right, so it starts back at the original position, and my beginning position and my final positions are the same. And the reason I did that is because I also wanted to loop it. And if you loop it, then if it ends at the same place where it started, then it makes it a lot easier to loop and make it look natural. So that's why I did that. That's not always going to be what you want to do, but that it is in this case. And then, so I have it moving. So this first part, from the first set of keyframes to the second set of keyframes, it is moving along primarily the x-axis. So it's just going from one end to the other. And then once it hits here, it stops, and we locked in the same key. We locked in the same. I hate it when I do that. It locks in the keyframe, so the Y value is set to 90 degrees, and these next Y values are set to 90 degrees. That's because I didn't want it change. I didn't want it to change from these first set of keyframes to the second set, but then I wanted it to turn around, and so that's where I changed the rotation of the Y value from 90 degrees to, let's look at that, should be negative 90 degrees, which is a 180 degree switch. And then I had it, kept that same 90 degree rotation, and then I moved it back to, let's zoom out here a little bit, back to about this point where I wanted it to stop. And then I locked in those keyframes again, so it kept the same rotation keyframes. Then I added another set of keyframes to turn it back to 90 degrees. So a way to think about this is with timelines, whenever you want it to change, anytime you want it to change something, you need to go, usually have like two sets of keyframes for any change you want to make. So here, starting here, I wanted it to be moved from one point to the next, okay? So 2 sets of keyframes. But then I wanted to turn around, and so I then made another set of keyframes. But see, these 2 sets of keyframes make up that rotation. So it goes from here to there. So, and then I made another set of keyframes. These 2 set of keyframes work together because I wanted to go from that location to that location. And then again, I have another set of keyframes. So even though you don't always have to have 2 separate sets of keyframes, you need to have, a lot of times to make a change, you need to have keyframes whenever you are going to make an adjustment. Lock in those keyframes. Because if I just deleted this rotation, it would just be rotating the entire time. And so it would start at one position, and this is actually what happened yesterday. As the car is moving, it would just rotate the entire way until it's there. So that's why you got to lock it in if you don't want it to move. So that's the way keyframes work, and they definitely can get a bit confusing because there's just a lot of values. I mean, we're working with 6 different values: translation and rotation. We're not working with scale in this sense, or in this demo. Okay, so that is the taxi. Let's look at, where was my other one? The fire truck. That's what I'm looking for. Let's look at the fire truck timeline. There it is. And this one is really similar. And you actually might notice that I have a couple extra accidental keyframes in there. because you can kind of see them doubled up here. Those were not on purpose. That's another thing with keyframes. If you accidentally make an extra keyframe, sometimes it's hard to see like it is here. And if I zoom way in on that, you can start seeing it separated. Yeah, there goes my separate keyframes. Let's get rid of that. So I'm going to get rid of this keyframe and this keyframe. I hope that doesn't just goof it up. It may have. It doesn't look like it did. Okay, so that's the issue, is that you might add keyframes and you're like, wait, which are the keyframes I actually wanted? Yeah, keyframes, am I right? All right, so we start here. Same thing happens. It gets to the other point, and then it actually kind of, see how it kind of keeps moving? So it actually keeps sliding down the x-axis. And let's zoom out. And see, it don't actually have another rotation keyframe. So it must actually, when it gets over here and it loops, it probably just flips around. Let's see how this works with the fire truck. Okay, so it gets to the other end, and then it turns around, and then it moves back. And then when it gets to the other end, because we don't have another set of rotation keyframes, it probably just flips. Exactly. So do you see what just happened there? It just like automatically switched. So just yeah, it changes positions just in a one frame. All right, so that is the what do you call it? The fire truck timeline. Now let's look at the plane timeline. Sorry, I'm getting distracted with what I'm doing here. All right, so let's zoom in on the plane, and let's do this. Let me find the plane. Select it. I just passed it. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Airport terminal. Nope. Airplane. Click F. Oh, shoot. Now it's really far out there. Oh, it's because I actually have all of these airplanes nested as one entity. All right. Let's press play and see what happens. Let me turn on the timeline for that. Okay. There we go. All right. So that's a little better looking than what we did yesterday. So what happened here? Let's just keep it paused and we will back it up. All right, so same thing. I locked in all the translation and rotation values at the very beginning, and this is when I'm not wanting to loop, so I don't have to actually position it back to where it started. However, what I did when I built this is that I did go ahead and I set these two keyframes really, well, I didn't actually set the Y keyframe. I just knew that I wanted to go really far out here. So I set the Z keyframe, the Z axis keyframe, so it actually moved really farther away. But it was just moving along the ground. And then I wanted to kind of experiment with how much do you want it to rise up and things like that. So what we have is, and we get it to here, along the, I don't know why that actually shouldn't need to be there. That's a confusing keyframe. So we have this X. X actually stays the whole time, so we really don't need those. Like I said, it's best to have all of your keyframes, but I'm deleting those keyframes just so we can narrow in on what is actually changing. So really, it's going from here to here pretty evenly on the x-axis. So it starts at this, or the z-axis, goes from here to this point here, and then you'll notice it really takes off here because it moves from 559 units to 3,000 units in just 1 second, whereas, and I'm looking at the z-axis, it went from -10 to 608. So it roughly went about 600 units in 9 seconds, And then from 9 seconds to 10 seconds, that being 1 second, it went from 600 units to 3,000 units. So in 1 second, it went 2,400 units, just like that. That's why it looks like it really takes off fast. Let's watch it again. And then it, boom, takes off like a rocket. Okay. Now, if you notice, you probably can't see it necessarily on your screen, but I can actually still see the plane. It's just sitting way, way out here right there. It's just it's a little dot, but, so I actually could move it out farther, and so you just can't see it, but it really is just sitting out there way out on the horizon. So that's the translation, moving it from one place to another. And then also, I need to press stop. And then from right here, I kept the same y-axis. So it's at 4.4 units all the way till here. And then we start raising it up a little bit from that point to this point. And then from this keyframe on the y-axis, it goes, about 4.5 units to 75 units in the course of, roughly 3 seconds. And then it goes from 75 units to 300 units in the course of 1 second. It looks like it actually it doesn't really look like it actually lifts up that much, but it is lifting up. It's just the perspective. All right, so that is the translation. Let's look at rotation right now. I have it locked in. The only thing I'm really rotating it is around the x-axis. So I'm just lifting it up. So that's why you only see keyframes there. So let's see. It's about a rotation of 2.5, not much. And then here it's 2.5 again. But as we start moving, it goes from 2.5. I'm going to use these actually. 2.5 to -8. Within, roughly 1 second. So then it starts to tilt a little bit. And then we actually just keep that same rotation the whole time. And again, if you hadn't noticed, these are really great. I probably should be using these. These are navigation buttons that allow you to move to each keyframe. So you can see exactly there. So, because if I scrub a little bit, it's a little bit off. So again, recovering the translation values, we're really only messing with primarily the Z and the Y. So we go to this first Y, and it's the same. And then from this first Y keyframe to the second Y keyframe there, it lifts up about 70 units. And then from this keyframe to the next keyframe, it lifts up from 75 to 300, which is 225 units. Along the Z axis, it moves from a position of -10 to 559, so roughly, I guess that is actually 500, I don't know what I said exactly. It's roughly 550 units in 9 seconds, and then with the last second, it moves from 559 units to 3,000. So, it's, again, about 2,400 units in 1 second. So that's how we're moving it along. Yes, keyframes, timelines, they can be a little bit tedious, but they're also very cool, and you can do a lot of stuff with them. So that is timelines. The other thing that I wanted to show you that I didn't get to yesterday is how would you build an experience using, and I didn't even put this on the agenda or anything, is how would you make it so you can kind of wander around this city from a first-person perspective? That's a really cool thing that you can do very easily using a fly cam. So if you go to Create Entity up here, and you select fly cam. I already have one in my scene, I think. Maybe I don't. I'm going to select fly cam, add it to my scene. Where is my fly cam? Let's move it up a little bit, and let's rotate it around. There we go. So we're putting it really close to the taxi. Let's lower it down a little bit. And then under the camera editor, or the camera component, I'm going to click main camera. I don't need to select follow, if I expand this out, follow editor cam. We don't need to do that because it doesn't need to be start wherever I leave off my editor camera. So let's go ahead and press play, see what happens. Okay. Now, the way this camera works is it uses the WASD keys. Forward being W, back being S, strafe left is A, strafe right is D. You can change these, of course, to be the arrows if you want, but I'll go ahead and use these. So if I move along in my scene, I'm pressing the Y key and I can look around. The difference with the fly cam is that if I do look up and have it going forward, I start flying. So there are some locks and stuff that you can make it to happen using this basic default camera. So where you're kind of on the same plane, the Y plane meaning. Let's increase the walk speed to 27. So we're moving kind of slow here. That's a little faster. Let's move the walk speed up to 100. I don't know why that's not doing it. Let's try the crawl speed. Let's try 200. And I have to stop and restart it. There we go. Let's do 300, see if that works. I might need to do it. Maybe I won't accept that. I won't do that. Turn speed, ascent, scene. I had this moving a lot faster the other day. I wonder why that is. Okay, I'll have to look into that. I don't know why it was moving a lot faster than my scene before. Why am I going so slow? But anyway, you get the point. So here we are. We can walk around our scene. Few things around. I can, using my mouse, I can look around and I can wander about in my scene. Pretty cool stuff. Here you see kind of the overlap of those entities, if you remember. The street level, and let me turn around. And I'll back up with the S. You see along the crosswalk here, that's because there's actually some overlap between the street entities. We have some questions. Suggestion for next demo. Particle generators on engines to create exhaust effects, increase particles and lifespan on a timeline to emulate thrust increase. That's a cool idea, actually. And really not all that difficult. Yeah, that's a really good idea. Question, can you change other attributes other than transform or rotation in a timeline? Could you change a particle value? Let's see. Particle value. I'm trying to think. What do you mean? Could you, let's see, who is this? Cloud Reach Stewart. What do you mean by particle value exactly? Are you talking about, like, which particle value are you talking about? If you give me a little more specific. Timelines are primarily used for translation values or transform values, meaning translation, scale, and rotation to increase the thrust effect. You can, one thing, let me show you this. You could, let's see, I'm trying to think how to do that. I haven't worked a lot with timeline or with particles. I've done a little bit. So I don't know right off the top of my head. But one thing you can do is that if you scroll down here, you can add event channels. And so somewhere on the event channel, I can create an event so it'll emit a message. And the state machine can use that message to make something else happen. So if you use a script component, you can fire off a script if you're using scripts for your particles. You might be able to, let's just add on. Let's add on a state machine to the fire station just because I want to search. Where is state machine? There it is. I want to search for particles. So let's add action, search for particles. Remove particles emitter attached to an entity. So let's see. So using these what was I going to say? Using these actions, I mean, you could create a state machine that will listen to an emitted message to either start or stop a particle system. However, to change a value within the particles, you'd probably have to create a custom script to do that. However, one thing I just realized is that let's add on. You asked about particles. Let me do something. So there's actually something you can do real easily. Let me change the name. So I added an empty entity. So let me explain what I'm doing. I'm just going to call it fire. I'm going to put this under the fire truck. Nope, I don't want to do that yet. This is just an empty entity. We're going to add it to my fire truck. Oops, not that. Where's my fire? Didn't I just create something called fire? Okay, great. Where was that fire entity? All right, so there it is. Empty entity. Let's put it on the back of the truck. Roughly. Oops. And then we're going to nest that fire entity in the fire truck. And then let's open up, let's add a state machine to the fire truck. Create a new one. We don't really need to do much. I'm just going to search for the action, the fire effects action. And let's see how it works. You are welcome. I think we have a fire truck on fire, which is ironic, huh? There we go. There's a fire truck on fire. That's kind of funny. Does that make sense what I did? I added an empty entity, and then I attached a state machine component to that entity, of which it's a very simple state machine with one state that has the fire effects state or action attached to it. So it goes off, it just emits when you press play. And then I nested that empty entity within the fire truck so that it follows it around all the time. So it is just, it just is on fire all the time. So, and I could add other things too to make it turn off and on and sort of thing. And there's a smoke entity too, so you could make something, have fire and smoke. So yeah, great question. All right, what was the other thing I wanted to cover? I think that's it for now. Let's move on to kind of continuing to build this city. This is on TurboSquid. This is what I bought. And it doesn't come in like this, but I would like to start building something similar to this, a large scene with lots of different entities. And so what I'm actually going to do is use this as a map to build off of. So what I'm going to do is start by creating a bunch of roads that go around. And so I'm going to start by adding an external highway. All right, and so I'm going to exit out of this scene because that scene, though, is cool, is not, I want it to be a little bit more believable, if you will. Because I had 9 blocks and, Broncos Stadium was just like on the other side of the city from the airport. So here we go. We have... where do we want to start? Let's start here. This is going to be our base point. So we are going to create a city that's several blocks long. All right. So how do we do this? I already have some buildings in here too, if you notice, but I haven't added textures to them. So what are we going to do? Let's get the highway. We have a bunch of small pieces of section of highway. And let's see, how many do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. All right, so we're going to be doing some duplicating and using empty entities. I'm going to add an empty entity, and I'm going to call this, what do we want to call this one? I'm going to call it road. I keep spelling it incorrectly. All right, and then I want to take all of these, the four-way highways. Oh, I got to do it individually. Into this guy. Just make sure I have it. Yep. All right. And then I'm going to build that there. I've nested that road. So now we have, if I select this road, I can move the whole thing along together. Now let's create another empty entity. And yes, I know you said that a little bit ago, Cloud Reach Stewart, but yes, exactly like Grand Theft Auto. That's the whole point of Sumerian, am I right? Let's make it, let's call it green median. Median? How do you spell median, actually? I don't think I've ever spelled that word before. So I'm going to put that in there, and then I'm going to put all of the, oh, there it is. It is, I did spell right. All right. So what we got is this road, and the cool thing is about all these, let me show you one of these small small little sections. What we got with these is they are equal in size. So check it out. These, oh shoot, I messed up the, I didn't mess it up, you just can't see it. These are all these models are built to scale, and so I can actually move it to an exact number and not have to estimate it. So let's go ahead and duplicate this road, and it's about there. So I think that -110, oops, is the exact number. Cool. So really, we move in increments of 110 units, which makes it pretty great. Another reason why I really like this model. So let's copy another one, duplicate it, and let's move it another. So we're going to make it 220. And then let's make another one and make it, I guess, 330. And again, I'm using this as a model. Like, how close am I to that? This doesn't have to be exact. I'm not making exactly the same. But that's probably pretty close. We're going to name this one. So we got this whole stretch, this whole section. We're going to call it Highway Right. And let's create another empty entity. I'm going to call this new empty external. Highway. Not highway. All right. And so what I'm doing is I'm going to create an external highway. It goes all the way around. So I'm going to make another one of, make it go all the way around. So I'm going to duplicate, so I'm going to highway right is what I just built. So let's work all within this external highway right now. And let's duplicate this guy. And we need to rotate it. Well, let's move it to roughly there. Let's get the transform values. Let's try to keep it nice and clean, 440. And then we need to rotate it around. Ooh, wait a second. Oh, I messed this up. I'm going to delete that. Okay. Here we go. I duplicated the wrong thing. So their external highway right has, I didn't have the intersection included in there. Okay, so we got this highway right. We're going to duplicate that. Then we're going to move it up to about 400 and 470, 480. I'm trying to eye it by making it line up. Nope. I want to look at that guy. Yeah, I think that 480 is correct. Great. Yeah, keeping these whole numbers is going to make it really, really nice. So we'll rotate this to 90 degrees. I'm hoping that this will be 20 units is the right number and is not. I'm hoping I can make all these numbers exact, and so I don't have to worry about any overlap. So I'm going to assume that that is 25, and this should probably be negative 455. Okay, that looks pretty clean. Does that kind of look right? It might be a little bit bigger, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be exact. Just roughly. And let's see. That's actually, yeah, that's all right. We have these kind of, what do you call them? These left-hand turns here, which probably doesn't make any sense for that. I'm not going to follow that exactly. I'm just going to continue to make these using just these intersections. Highway right 2, we're going to call it highway top. And then I'm going to duplicate that guy. And I bet you 505 is correct. When I say correct, I mean probably the value in which they come nice and snug up against each other without overlapping. Let's rename this to highway left. And let's return it that way. Nope, we need 180 degrees. And notice that we didn't change the scale for any of these too. Let's do 480 and oops. Nope. Okay, I think that's nice and even. Okay, and then let's do actually a better way. I should have copied the first one to do the left. I'm going to do the top and duplicate this one. But we need to flip that around, I guess just negative 90 degrees. Nope. I need to duplicate it. And then probably 25. Then we'll make it negative 90 degrees, flip it around, and then we'll drag it over here. And I bet you we got a nice round, not quite, I'm close, number 455. That's what we're looking for. Okay, makes sense? Everybody follow along? Great. So now I have the basics to get started here. Is that how big I want to do it? It might be a little bit too big. So I'm going to look at my left one. Let's delete that section of road. And then let's look at highway right. Oops, I need highway bottom. I guess it's just how I'm looking at it here. And let's see, highway right, we need to get the last, so that road we want to delete. And then we need to move that intersection actually up. To probably negative 80. Nope. Probably negative 85. Yep, negative 85. That's the number I'm looking for. Yep. All right. And then also the green median, which we can get to another time. Needs to be negative 110. Great. Okay. And then highway bottom, let's move this back up. Okay, so we want just a slightly smaller, bet you 85, negative 85 is what I want. Okay. Now here's the thing. Where is the center of our city? It's actually right over here. So, well, no, I don't want to move it. No, because I would mess up all of the values. So I'm going to leave it like this. So anytime we add a new city, it's going to come in right down here in the corner. But that I want to keep these nice and consistent. So here we go. This is our city. Let's add a few more things. Let's see. I got about 10 minutes left. Keep building away. Ask any questions if you are curious about anything related or unrelated. Let's see here. Let's build a street that goes all the way. Let's build. Let's see, what should I do first? It's a very good question. Let's build this one. So we got a two-way street that goes from top to bottom. So let's do that. Let's grab my. I don't have it on this computer. I do, but I just need to go grab it real quick. All the files from this. What am I trying to say? All the files from this pack that I purchased from TurboSquid. And I'm not seeing it. If I don't see it, then I will just call this good for now. But I might have it. Just looking for it here. My bad. Not seeing it in here. Where did it go? simple polygon. Not seeing it. Okay. I'm going to have to bring it back on this computer and to continue on. But I'm going to do some work on this over the week, and hopefully I can get kind of like all my roads laid out, so then we can actually start putting some buildings in and cars, and just kicked my camera, sorry, and start actually adding some more, some interactivity. So again, yeah, we're going to be adding to this and working on this as an ongoing project. So I hope you join me, and we're always going to be adding new elements to this. That is my goal with this. And so I hope you follow along. If you're curious about the actual model I'm looking at here, let me find that for you. I have it. I do have it. I will post it in just a moment. I'll post that. I'll get it and post it. So I am going to sign off here. However, I do want to throw up some resources for community content or resources for the Sumerian community. This involves a number of, what is this? I'm going to just pull it up here. Here are some different links that you can have. So the top one for AWS, the top one, these are all bit.ly links. So those are Sumerian tutorials, Sumerian documentation, Sumerian FAQs. There's also a meetup group that we have. We do have a Sumerian Slack channel, or Slack channel, not Slack channel, Slack group that you can join. And that's where a lot of people are. So I hope that you can actually join us on Slack. And if you have questions, you can ask us there. And if we can't answer, sometimes a lot of community members actually get to the questions before we do, which is really great. So feel free to contribute in any way you would like. And then, of course, we do have different Twitch channels, especially the AWS Twitch channel. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this up, or I'm going to put this back up. But for now, I will see you next week on Tuesday on the AWS channel, and then again on Wednesday here on my own channel. So thanks for joining me, especially Sweet Games and CloudReach Stewart. Thank you for joining and asking questions. Love the community. So thank you guys. We will see you soon.